Thank you, Dominic, and thank you for having Nedbank here today. We're very delighted to be at ADU this year. It is actually Nedbank's 20th ADU that we are attending, and I'm honoured to be here with such a great quality panel. As Dominic said, I'm Cathy Nader from Nedbank Corporate and Investment Bank. Nedbank is a large South African bank with a very strong mining presence on the African continent. We have been consistently providing finance to mining companies in Africa for over 20 years. I'll briefly hand over to our panelists to do a quick intro before we continue with the panel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Karl Cicanese. I'm the Managing Director of Lycopodium Minerals and a Director of Lycopodium Limited. I'd like to welcome everyone to Perth and I hope you've had an enjoyable day. For those of you that aren't familiar with Lycopodium as an organisation, we're an international engineering and project delivery specialist organisation, ASX listed, and have been working on African projects for over 30 years. We deliver projects globally, but APAC, Africa and the Americas, and we are currently working in 15 African countries and have a strong affiliation with a number of governments, owners, operators, builders and a lot of local partners in Africa. From our perspective, we predominantly work in the base minerals and precious metals space, and we are particularly known for our expertise in gold processing plants. Thank you.
Kevin Balloch, CFO of Base Resources. You heard from Tim Carstens just a minute ago, so I'm sure you are up to speed on Base Resources assets, mineral sands, rare earths, part of the Energy Fuels Group now.
Craig Barnes, CFO of Deep Yellow Limited. We're an ASX-listed uranium exploration and development company with assets in Namibia and also in Australia.
Teck, CFO for Lindian, presented earlier on our flagship Tier 1 Kangankunde project in Malawi, so I won't repeat the details, but we're ASX listed and under the ticker code LIN.
Thank you, Teck. So, as this panel is stated in the brochure, we're going to be chatting about taking a DFS from feasibility to financing and what gaps can be present in a feasibility study that can hinder its success. And it's very clear to us as financiers that the quality of the DFS is dependent on the financing strategy embedded in it, and the DFS really needs to show a clear path to development. It needs to be transparent with a very clearly defined roadmap to development. It really is not just a technical study, but needs to cover things such as logistics, procurement strategy, detailed capital costing, contingency planning, and the purpose today is to have a chat to these companies who are in various stages of development and in their DFS process, and then to have a little twist with Lycopodium on the panel to give their view as EPCM and detailed engineers. So, Kevin, I'm going to start with you if that's all right. Base Resources very successfully built and operated the Kwale mineral sands mine in Kenya. Nedbank was a funder to that. And can you tell us what key learnings from that process would you take into the development of Toliara in Madagascar?
Thanks, Cathy. Yeah, the Kwale project was a project finance facility that was built back in 2012, 2013, started operating in late 2013. Some of the key learnings from feasibility study through to operation and having to then sort of service your finance arrangements were that project financing is a tough space to be. There are many things that once you have been through one, you'll ensure that next time you take a slightly different approach. Feasibility studies, as a single project company, are often trying to showcase or promote you as a company, and sometimes I see some companies in the space, in the single asset space, perhaps over-promote and some of the assumptions are a little bit optimistic, especially on ramp-up profiles. Some of the prices may be a little bit at the higher end as well because you're trying to, put your best foot forward. Once you get through the feasibility study, your assumptions are then locking in for project financing, and your feet will be held to the fire on meeting those assumptions. If you're too aggressive on ramp-up, too aggressive on recoveries, and it doesn't pan out that way, then the completion tests, which are a necessary part of parent guarantees falling away and some of the rates dropping as more comfort is given to the lenders, they are a challenge. And so consider very carefully that you will have to deliver on your assumptions when you get into production. I guess some of the other learnings are commodity cycles are never doing what you think. And in our case, we ended up in production at the sort of downward trending end of the commodity cycle. We were forecast at the feasibility study to go through and have high prices for the first 3 or 4 years, get all our debt paid off. It turned out to be the opposite. Prices were sliding rapidly. We found ourselves in some of the worst commodity price environment for mineral sands that there had been in a long time. So don't over-leverage your project if it's not a tier 1 first quartile project. If it's mid-pack, think about how much leverage your project can support and test your assumptions. The banks will look at your prices and they'll go, that's nice, but I've got my own price deck here, which is much more conservative, ensures they can get paid back over the life of the project. So test your assumptions rigorously internally, just so you know where the limits are, and that way you can develop a funding plan around it. So probably one of the most important lessons in an African context that we found out the hard way and is useful for planning purposes for everyone else in this room is VAT that you incur during construction may not come back when you think it's going to come back. Most developers will assume, and the financiers will see in the cash flows, early VAT refunds, the big lumps that you incur during construction. And it doesn't always work out that way. So plan that your VAT, which is often a large amount, doesn't get refunded during a critical time for debt repayment. Put it further out into a period where you don't depend on it to make your debt repayments. And that's an approach that we've taken ever since, and it does really pay dividends because you can't have that as a must-have win for the cash flow. It needs to be measured when you get it to a period you don't need it. They're probably some of the key learnings I've had.
Thanks, Kevin. And, I 100% agree. The DFS and how the financiers are going to look at it needs to be realistic, not overly optimistic, so we can design a banking solution that is suitable and we don't have to retrofit after the fact. And Kevin, logistics was obviously a key factor for the Kwale project, not just from shipping the final product, but also in circuit when you switch to hydraulic mining. And often we see logistics and working capital under-analyzed in a DFS. And I wanted to understand from you, in hindsight, did you give sufficient focus to the logistics in your DFS at Kwale?
So logistics from a construction point of view, yes. We had some pretty tricky logistics. Some of the biggest pieces of construction equipment coming in had to come across a ferry that could only carry the truck of the size needed and offload that truck on the other side on a very particular high tide. So logistics were very key during the initial build. Logistics are critical. Infrastructure, what do you have access to, what don't you have access to, determines what your CapEx requirements are going to be. During operations, you're going to be putting a lot of equipment, or a lot of truckloads in our case, of finished product through to the port. How do you do that in a safe fashion, as you know, you are adding to the road volumes and significantly, vehicles, significantly large vehicles going down the road. So safety, community considerations, community education as to what to expect with those sort of changes, critical to getting a safe environment and buy-in from the community when you do start.
And Kevin, it's always stood out to us at Nedbank how invested Base Resources was with the local community. And I wanted to understand, did your engagement with local communities and having local partners both during DFS stage and during production, do you think that improved the outcome at Kwale?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, the resources belong to the country, and we have to partner with both the government, the local county government, national government, local county government, and the local communities. Everyone has to feel a win-win. We need to ensure, for, I guess, a lack of a better term, a social license within the area, the countries in which we operate, or the communities in which we operate. So we chose very early on, and as a philosophy you would have heard Tim talk about earlier, to ensure that we gave back to as much to the community. We could start early with training, start early with community programs, a lot of scholarship. We had a sort of three-pronged strategy on education, livelihood improvement and healthcare, and they proved very successful and needed in the areas in which we worked. So we were always focused on ensuring that you pay what you need to pay. The country's got to feel that it's getting value for its resources. The community's got to feel that they're getting jobs from the mine and from the flow-down effects from other people having jobs. Everyone's got an expectation, and it's hard to meet all of those expectations. You can't employ everyone, but you can try to do other social programs to try and ensure that your reach goes as far down into the community as possible. And I think, look, it does pay dividends. You get a lot of support from the community and from the government if you partner well with them. Thanks,
Kevin. And finally, with Base Resources, you've always engaged your funders early in the process, and no different on Toliara. Engaging with funders in the DFS stage really helps to build a solution that is going to be appropriate for the funding of the project. And I wanted to understand, how has your early engagement with financiers like Nedbank, amongst others, impacted your DFS for Toliara and your procurement strategy?
Yeah, each country has its own peculiar country limits based on, for each bank, what they're willing to invest into a country. So understanding what is available is critical to understanding how you're going to structure your facilities between commercial heavy, or looking at export credit agencies, looking at multilaterals like IFC, or other opportunities with different lending groups. Understanding early where the likely funds are going to come from is pretty critical in terms of timeline, in terms of strategy for where you may want to source some of your equipment and contractors from. We'll take the case of the Toliara project, where it is constrained from a commercial bank perspective on the ticket size banks are willing to put into Madagascar. But the solutions to that are through export credit agencies such as South Africa's Export, I'm not sure actually, ECIC.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what the whole name stands for. But through ECIC, they will lend quite significant amounts of money into African jurisdictions for companies who are willing to have a great deal of African content, and South African content in particular. And that really does influence where you may source some of your contractors and equipment from, and that's a strategy that we've tried to ensure we leverage, because that's where a source of funds are going to be for the project.
Absolutely, and early engagement on that topic is critical for that procurement strategy. Thank you, Kevin. Craig. So Craig is CFO at Deep Yellow, who is a client of Nedbank's at the moment. We are mandated on their project finance process. A disclaimer up front. Deep Yellow is, you completed your DFS in 2023, and obviously uranium prices have trended down since then, and you're still awaiting FID. I know, Craig, you're doing a lot of work at the moment in optimizing your DFS and a detailed cost estimation, at the same time advancing your project finance process. And I wanted to understand if you feel there have been benefits in starting that debt process prior to FID, and if there's an interplay between your funding and this cost optimization process you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. So yes, I think it's absolutely critical that you start engaging with potential lenders early on, and we've mandated Nedbank, as Cathy says, as our lead arrangers, looking at putting in place bank finance. The reason that's critical is ideally by the time you make your final investment decision, you ideally want to be fully funded. And engaging those lenders early, or potential lenders, allows you to build those relationships. It also allows you to explore various funding options, bank debt and other alternative debt potentially, and then also equity, and look at what your optimized funding structure looks like. As Kevin said, the type of asset will dictate how much leverage you want to have. So all of those considerations and interactions with the bank and potential lenders early on can only benefit you. And part of when you do eventually make your final investment decision, you want to execute that plan as quickly as possible. So if you've done that early on and you've got the funding in place, it allows you to execute quickly, and that in turn allows you to deliver the project on budget and on schedule, which is a key consideration. Also, part of interacting with lenders early allows you to also start with your independent technical expert or independent technical engineering review process early on. And there are definite benefits from doing that, because that really tests the quality of your DFS, which Cathy mentioned is very important, and allows you to pick up potential gaps and pick them up early on, so that you can look at de-risking those areas specifically. It allows you to focus on things like CapEx and also your OpEx. And I think when you're looking at building a new project, I like to break down the risk into the construction risk phase, which is up to completion of construction and commencement of commissioning and production. And then obviously there's the ramp-up phase, which was also mentioned earlier, is a key area that needs to be looked at. And going through that ITE process early on allows you to identify those risks and make sure you have realistic ramp-up production schedules in place. So, yeah, important to engage with lenders early on.
Thank you, Craig. And Craig, you've been involved with other project development processes through your career. What would you say is the biggest or some of the biggest lessons you've learned from these roles in terms of how you can use your DFS as a tool or a strategic roadmap to get to development?
Yeah, as we said already, I think the accuracy of the DFS is critically important. And that's a very key learning that I've had through the various projects that I've been involved with in the past. I think one of the critical elements of a DFS is the resource itself, the mineral resource and ore reserve. And it's critical to get that right, because without that, nothing else can happen. So if you can start your infill drilling programs as early as possible to firm up those resources and reserves, that's a key learning that I can take from previous experience. Also, again, going through the ITE process and also during the DFS, you can use the DFS to identify material risk areas and focus on de-risking those areas. So having things like offtake agreements in place, potentially, offtake agreements or potential hedging in place to de-risk downside in commodity prices. Also to optimize your production plans, so that's both your mining plans and processing as well. So I think those are all very important learnings that you can probably take from having executed projects before.
Thank you, Craig. Ultimately, lenders and sponsors want the same thing, to see a project go into development quickly, successfully, and have sustained operations over time. Teck, thank you for joining us. And Teck, I know you are developing, and apologies if I don't pronounce it correctly, the Kankunda Rare Earth Project in Malawi. And, interestingly, you did your DFS on a two-phased approach. And often we see DFSs come to market and then have to be optimized and then broken down into phases. And, it was interesting to see Lindian doing this two-stage DFS up front. And, you're fully funded for stage one, fully permitted, moving towards construction and already planning for phase two. And can you elaborate for us the reason for breaking it down into these two phases at the DFS stage? And was your financing strategy, did that play a role in that decision?
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. It's a great question. So when the DFS was announced, obviously, we did look at around sensitivities of the project, what pricing assumptions you use, whether it's a low case, base case, or high case, and then the free cash flows that are derived from it. So, if you run, your investment thesis, principles through is how much on a discounted basis, is your CFAS or free cash flow to firm derive, and will it pass, your rate of return? So I think for our project, we were a single asset junior, but with a tier one asset, and to derive a 99% internal rate of return was an easy decision to get past go with stage one. So stage one will produce 15,000 tonnes per annum and derive an NPV of around $1 billion. We did phase it to bring that capital cost. We were cognizant, as a single asset junior, what is your market cap? Ordinarily, banks won't lend you, over, in the gold space, you might see 70% gearing, but ordinarily, if you apply a 50-50 debt equity mix, you got to make sure that you can support the debt, and your market cap will allow you not to raise multiple times of your market cap to call FID as well. So, we did break that down. It did work as a strategy. Stage two has been underpinned as well through our strategic partnership. But ultimately, there was a coin phrase, one of the investment banks US investment banks said, you just got to get past go and get your project off the ground.
Thanks, Teck. And obviously now, because you've advanced phase one, you've done your DFS, did you find any gaps in that DFS in the implementation of phase one that you will use and learn from for phase two?
Yeah, so I think, phase two will be a brownfield expansion. It will be a doubling, tripling of capacity. Our DFS announced that we'll go from 15,300 to 50,000 tonnes per annum. The CapEx size will be larger. We will have to, we may consider project financing through ECAs as well. There is a lot of strong support for rare earths. But one of the things that we will work on is to get ready, in that instance, if we do want to finance through government sources, to comply with Equator Principles 4, which is governed by the World Bank and IFC. So we do want to, that's something we're working through in the ESIA to make sure that we do comply with the World Bank standards.
Thank you, Teck. And once again, congratulations on your offtake arrangement with Iluka. Obviously, that was a key milestone for Lindian. And has this agreement with Iluka influenced your financing for phase two in any way? Yes. Your financing strategy?
Yeah, so stage two has been substantiated by three things, as I mentioned earlier today. First is we do have the permits from the government of Malawi to expand our mining license for increase in production capacity. The Iluka strategic partnership involves stage 2. So as part of the offtake agreement, that can be upsized from 6,000 tonnes to 31,000 tonnes. So as part of stage 2, we did consider it when we signed the partnership agreement with Iluka that they will be there as a customer, so you do have contracted revenue for stage 2. So you do have to find a home for your product. It is a high-spec monazite con that we produce, but we do want to make sure that we locked in the offtake agreement for our stage 2 increase. As part of that, there's a right of last refusal as well. Iluka will, as part of the partnership, will have an opportunity to fund 50% of the capex to increase their volumes up to 31,000 tonnes per annum. So it has influence. When we de-risk the project for stage 1, our financing costs will come down. There are a lot of financing options available, and we're starting to talk to banks such as Nedbank around potential financing for stage 2 as well.
Thank you, Teck. Now we're going to move to Karl from Lycopodium. We've chatted very much from a financing perspective, but the two really dovetail each other. Karl and Lycopodium have worked on many projects that Nedbank have financed. You're a very experienced project delivery company and engineers. I was telling Karl earlier at Nedbank and at our credit committees, when we know Lycopodium is working on a project, it's a big tick from us given their strong delivery track record. And it's great to get your perspective, Karl. You've worked obviously, as I said, on many projects in Africa on an EPCM basis and from the DFS stage. In your mind, what is the biggest gap in DFS studies that you've seen, and what would be your advice to closing the gap to any junior mining companies looking to develop a project?
Thanks, Cathy. Great question, and great insights from the rest of the panellists as well. From an engineering perspective, it's really good to hear your thoughts and views on the financing, because from an engineering and project delivery perspective, we're dealing mainly with the feasibility study in terms of the technical element or the coordinating engineer for everybody else's inputs. One of the things we find is a major, or it's the most important point we think, is select your partners early. Select the right partners, whether it be engineering or mining or other sub-consultants, so that you have experts that are familiar with the process, the commodity, or the country and the jurisdiction, and that are aligned with the goals of the company, whether it's a tier 1, mid-tier or a junior, because we work for all three. It's aligning yourselves with organisations that have the same approach, same culture, and want the same outcomes. And also aligning yourselves with companies that have that track record, because there are certain pockets of Africa which have different ways to operate, different ways to conduct the feasibility study. So it's engaging early with the right partners. And really the key point and the key thing we always talk about is do the work during the feasibility study. Good projects come off the back of good feasibility studies. Financing of projects that have done a lot of work and a lot of the heavy lifting and challenged the assumptions and any of the potential constraints during the feasibility study always, in my mind, lead to better outcomes and stand up to the DD process, which goes through every discipline. I know I'm talking from an engineering and a project delivery perspective, but also during a feasibility, one of the things that happens, having worked on hundreds of different projects and in Africa over 30 years, and myself personally included on a lot of the projects during feasibility and in execution, is that we tend to separate the technical from the commercial or the financial. And then you put all this work into getting the best technical solutions and the best flow sheet or the best layout and all the best kit that you can select. And it gets towards the end of the feasibility and you're doing the first review and everybody says, well, hang on, that's too high. That's we're going to struggle to finance that. The value is X amount. As a junior or mid-tier or a, when we look at, does it need to be phased? Does the plant need to be modularised? And then there's always this DFS update or a DFS review and everybody's scrambling at the end. So from my mind is, key points, select the right partners, do the work during the DFS, but understand if there's any key constraints. Then we can build that into the technical solutions, whether it has to be phased, whether it has to be modularised, then we can work through that collaboratively, and it goes back to everyone's raised the same points: early engagement, early collaboration. During the feasibility, engaging with the financiers, understanding where you sit in terms of the market and in terms of the eyes of the financiers. So I know I'm trying to speak from more of a technical perspective, but that's our take on it.
And Karl, I know you're talking very much around aligning technical and commercial stakeholders and views in the DFS stage. Another critical part of the successful development is the ramp-up phase, the construction phase. Do you find that within a project company there's good alignment between the technical team on the ground and the commercial team? And do you feel that this is an important iterative sort of feedback loop within a company to ensure success?
Look, another good question, and those of us in the room that have been involved in project development, let's call it, and for a number of years, understand that we need to know what the outcome is going to be. You need to make sure that you're working with the right people that are aligned with that, and your contracting strategies, your procurement strategies, and your understanding of also the local procurement requirements, and weaving those into the feasibility study, so you understand that the mechanical equipment list or the bulk material list or the pipeline list, you understand exactly what you're buying in the countries that you're operating before you get to a stage where you've developed the schedule and the capital cost estimate. Because when you get to the end of the feasibility, you want to have within the level of accuracy of a feasibility, whether it's a bankable feasibility or whatever standard you're working to, whether it has to be an NI 43, 101, whatever the requirements, you want to make sure that you've tested the assumptions, but you've also, the contracting strategy, the procurement strategy, all ties into that development of the capital cost estimate. And then that way you have surety moving forward that you're going to get, as the guys said, the outcome is, you want surety in schedule, you want surety in delivery, and you want surety in ramp up. So if you select the right partners, I know I'm biased, I'm talking from an engineering company's perspective, is that, you get a good technical partner, it's bulletproof, that plant's going to work and it's going to ramp up quickly. It sounds easy, it rolls off the tongue, but it's not easy to do. Then you make sure that the CapEx is tied together with some robust and vigorous engagement. Like I said, local procurement, big thing, global procurement. And Kevin raised a good point earlier about transport and logistics. That's a significant risk on any project in any country, and particularly in countries where they don't have a specific infrastructure in place. So it's doing the work during the feasibility, actually, to get a CapEx that's going to stand up to scrutiny by world experts, but then also that the CapEx and the schedule will hold during development.
So Karl, developing local networks in country and local procurement partners is very important for the construction phase, but would you say it's also as important for the operational phase of a project?
100%, because when we're on the ground early during, let's call it, construction, and as we're moving through construction completions and into commissioning, is that we, typically we like to work with local communities. We establish not only the training and development, but most of the people that are employed from the countries in which we operate work in construction. They're trained in construction. We have a lot of training programs. All the companies up here understand and what that process involves, and everybody's on board with it. I can know, all the companies we work with, that training and development, and also helping to establish expertise that then can lead into setting up of local businesses that can supply any operation with, whether it's something as basic as protective equipment, PPE, or whether it's setting up businesses to help with maintenance and shutdown work, which will go on for years and years for life of mine, sometimes 6 to 8 years, sometimes 20 years. So the construction and completions, commissioning phase, that is a really important phase to train locals that will then establish local businesses and that will support the life of mine for the duration.
Thanks, Karl. I think, a key message or theme for us is that early engagement with funders, with engineers, EPCM contractors, and the whole development of the DFS being really an iterative process is, a key factor for success. And, we've got great panelists here who've given their experience, and Karl, And this is quite a, it's a topical topic. I know, need to break for tea at 4:05, so we've got some time for questions from the floor. Yes, I don't know if someone can bring you a mic. Hi, Dom. And there's another question in the front here when you're finished. Yeah.
Very informative exposition of ideas and very accurate. I suppose my question is relates to this end part that you were talking about. A project is creating a little ecosystem in a way, and focusing on that dimension of alignment. I just wondered if anyone had maybe a story or a short anecdote. I think there's an important human dimension here about the people involved, the communication. Does anyone have maybe an experience where the communication between the people, the hiring, the getting the right people, the right synergy together has resulted in a good outcome or maybe a not so good outcome? Just about the human side, is anyone, if anyone's able to maybe venture a comment about that? Hiring people or putting a team together?
I'll give a response from our perspective, is that, we work for a lot of repeat clients in Lycopodium and a lot of newer clients. But there's no secret to having ongoing work with repeat clients, because it's all based on relationship, and the relationship's based on people, it's based on alignment. And so the teams we work with, it's as big as an industry as it is, it's not that big, especially in certain parts of Africa where we work. So the people, it's critical. It's all about the people on our own teams and alignment with owners' teams and other sub-consultants.
I might just add something that's kind of different from hiring teams, but thinking about operational teams as your mine moves through its phases from, the start-up into operations and extended operations. One of the big learnings we had from developing our Kwale operation in Kenya was that, and the feedback we received from some of our employees, particularly the employees from the local area, we have a very focused employment regime, which gives as much opportunity to those closest to the mine as possible. But a lot of the skills that we needed for the operational aspects of the mine weren't available locally. So a lot of local employees got relatively unskilled labour, and it made it harder for them to climb through the management chain to get to senior positions. And they always saw those positions being given to people from elsewhere in Kenya, from, up country, as they call it. One of the learnings for us taking that experience into development in Toliara is start the training of the local teams early. The unskilled labour, skill them up. Allow them to go into, leading hand or supervisor roles when you get to operation by training them before construction even starts. So they're getting an equal sort of level, equal playing field as others coming in from different parts of the country or internationally. And they can feature more in your management team as they grow in experience with the mine.
Thank you. I think we've got a question in the front here, if you don't mind bringing a mic. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It was a very insightful session. I would like to know, how have you handled, or how would you handle a situation whereby government is asking free equity in your project? How are you going to factor that in your financial modeling? And the other thing I wanted to know is, how have you handled the community agitation in terms of back sampling during the FS? Because people think you have started mining already. how has that been handled? Thank you.
You want me to maybe start on the...
Thank
So
you,
I think
Craig.
as a mine development company about to invest a significant amount of capital, I think it's key for the company to understand what the local regulations are in the countries that we operate. So when it comes to ownership of mines, I think it's very, very important for the company as well as investors of the company to understand those regulations up front so that we can model those minority interests or whatever interests from the local government. So just the certainty of that is really important for us. I mean, the last thing you want is to invest a significant amount of capital, raise all the funding, and then have the regulations change. I think that's the last thing you want to see as a company.
Thanks, Craig. And, you know, I'll just reiterate from a funder's perspective, understanding the ownership structure upfront is key and it can be factored into any investment decision. But needing to understand the certainty of that regime not changing is equally as important. So consistency from government is key rather than the actual number itself in terms of free equity.
Yeah, I might just add on that as well. And one thing Malawi has is it's got a well-established DTA with the UK government as well. The double taxation agreement, it is quite a stable framework in terms of corporate income tax, royalties, community development fee. And there is, if you see, Lotus, Kilakari, they've got a mining development agreement, which is a fiscal stability regime as well that locks down those fiscal terms. So, yeah, I think, you know, Malawi is definitely a fantastic place in terms of our investment jurisdiction.
Thank you, Teck. And I see time is up. Thank you, everyone. It was a very enjoyable panel, a great group of panelists with different experiences, and I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.